Hey, in this podcast with long-standing client Chour, we talk about the ins and outs of building up a large portfolio. We talked about how to sell, when to sell. We talked about property management, and we talked about the journey itself. So do tune in and make sure that you listen till the end, because there's some really good gems right in the end.
Investing Insights with Right Property Group, exploring trends in real estate and helping property investors gain financial security.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this film version of Property Investing Insights. This is the one where I don't have Phil with me, which means that you actually get some good substance. And Phil, I know you're listening to this. Guys, today I've finally snagged someone that lived just 5 minutes away from us, and we've been promising each other since COVID to catch up. And it took me cajoling him to get him to this podcast as a way to catch up. So looks like I'll be bringing him a free coffee after this podcast. And the reason why I wanted to bring this guest, who's been using our services since 2012, is we've been talking a lot about how portfolios can become positive over time, how it's okay to buy units, and how it's okay to sell as well. Our guest today, Chour, has done this all, and he, as we were traveling in, he mentioned that he has these mini retirements along the way in the journey. So we'll explore all of that. So Chour, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Victor. Excited to be here.
Yeah, and we were talking about our initial journey and how you got in touch with us. You actually put a friend in touch with us, and then he brought you back into the RPG fold.
Yeah, that's right. So I started my property investing journey probably 2008. Mm-hmm. So I was doing, trying to be smart and, be the property developer that you all aspire to be. Mm-hmm. So I bought land and started developing houses. And this friend of mine, we were talking about property investing, and he was also just getting started. Cut the long story short, we caught up again about 2 years after that first discussion. And as we were talking, we were just asking each other, how's your property journey going? So he asked me first, and I was like, yeah, I've got, 2 properties under the belt.
Feeling very proud of yourself?
Proud, one property per year type thing. Mm-hmm. So I asked him the same question, and he's very humble guy, the most humble guy you'll ever meet. He's like, yeah, rolling, yeah, I'm going okay. Yeah, I got 6. And it just blew my mind. I'm like, what how'd you do that? Mm-hmm. So anyway, he put me on to meeting you guys, Right Property Group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the rest, as they say, was history, because we rapidly accumulated properties, and I think at peak we were sitting at 21 accumulations, right? So, which we'll go through them on a high level. But first, let's talk about your employment journey. So when you started, you were working with I think which bank?
Commonwealth Bank.
Which bank? And what was your profession?
Oh, so I was funny story, because I left university as a computer engineer during the .com bust.
Yes.
So I came out with no job prospects pretty much. Mm-hmm. So Commonwealth Bank actually hired me as a help desk support staff on the technical team.
Yep.
And at the time, I was supporting one of their applications for home lending systems.
Yep.
And me, just fresh out of uni, trying to understand what some of this terminology. Yeah, exactly. So these users of the system were talking to me in all sorts of foreign languages, like refinances and interest only and principal and interest. I had no clue.
Mm-hmm. How old were you at the time?
I was probably in my early 20s. Yeah.
So really no financial nuance behind you. You had a degree and you're thrown off the deep end.
Correct, yeah. Mm-hmm. But I am so grateful for that experience, because that taught me the power of money and the leverage capabilities that it can afford you to build your wealth. Mm-hmm. So I did that job for a good 10 years. So I moved up from help desk up to technical business analysis, and then actually developing the systems. So helping the product team and engineers build out home lending systems. And that's what gave me the deep insight and understanding of financing.
And so you started investing at an early age. You mentioned that you got into developments. What attracted you there?
Oh, I think a lot of it was just the glitz of it all. You know, hearing people do developments. I didn't have a strategy. It was just, I'm working. I've got some money in the bank. I got to do something with it. I understood the power of leverage. So, you know, borrowing other people's money to make more money. So, and buyer's agency back then was non-existent in my head anyway. So it was all about me using my skills, what little I had anyway, to try and make it big in the property game, because property and money is something I knew from an early stage that the banks were willing to leverage up to 95% and in some cases 100% at the time.
So lending was fairly easy at that time. And I guess we were just rolling off the back of the GFC. So definitely in terms of developments and developers, that was on the rise. So how many developments did you end up doing? And also, I'd assume that they're all in New South Wales?
No, so I started, my first property was in Tarneet.
Okay.
Not Tarneet, Truganina in Werribee.
In Werribee, in Victoria.
Victoria.
Yep.
Don't know how I got there, but ended up buying land there. So, and you know, back then, 2008, like what's that? A long time ago. You know, so back then it was just all farmland. There was nothing there. So, like I said, strategy, didn't know what I was doing, just managed to score some land for a good price. And then just went ahead and found a builder and built a house.
And have you still got that in your portfolio?
No, I actually sold that. So we can go through that in a bit later, the reasons for selling. But so Truganina, and then a year after that, I then did the same thing in Tarneet.
So you left New South Wales, you're a resident of New South Wales, and you got into an interstate as a first foray into property. And I guess that's jumping off the deep end, right? Because you've complicated it from the viewpoint of, okay, it's not in your backyard. And sometimes when you do start investing, that does make sense, right? Because then you're not clouded with your local stigma and local knowledge.
Yeah, 100%. So I don't know, like, to be honest, I had no idea why I went down to Victoria. I think at the time I just read a lot online and heard that a lot of developers were doing stuff in Victoria. So, and back then, you know, you didn't have podcasts and you didn't have a lot of the information that you currently have today.
So obviously, how did the build process go? Were there any problems with the build at that time?
The build process wasn't too complicated, like getting the contracts and stuff signed. It was more the after the fact of the build. So that's when I came to realize that, you know, within your warranty period, obviously, but I had so many issues with plumbing, with sewage systems getting clogged up. So, you know, I went with the cookie cutter builder. You know, they just pump out property after property. And, you know, the quality sometimes could be questionable. But, you know, me being young, you don't really do a lot of the due diligence.
So, of course, then you met your friend who you had instantly put in touch with us, right? And that changed your perspective towards investing, where you're still very much hands-on, but it was a totally different type of property that you were buying.
Yeah, correct. So it opened my world up into, okay, you don't need to always build new. A lot of the time, back then too, I was chasing the negative gearing. So when I started speaking to yourself, that's when I started learning about, oh, okay, if you just buy existing product and manufacture equity, so add another room, do a renovation.
Or just leave it alone.
That opened up a whole new world to me. And then I understood how you could really scale and ramp up your wealth journey by really buying smart.
And we're not buying hugely below market. These properties were, for the all wants and purposes, retail or just below retail, right? We're just being very selective in what we're buying.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So, I mean, like, at the time, my financial circumstances, I was working, not bad money, but then those first two properties in Victoria was taking a big hit on my cash flow. So
Yeah. And so how did lending happen in terms of the portfolio? Because from what we've gone through in terms of the journey, I know that you accumulate quite rapidly. How did the lending look?
The lending, I still had fuel in the tank,
Yep.
if you want to call it that. So, but it was more, where was I going to spend this fuel on next? And I know doing the same thing I did previously wasn't probably the best use of my money or servicing capacity. So after talking to you guys, that's when I was like, okay, let's ramp this up. I already understood property in a sense and financing. So I already came into this discussion with you with the decision that I am 100% going down the property path. So I think we met up 2012. And my golly, that was just a blur. It was a whirlwind year. That.
Yeah.
Do you want to go through that?
Yeah,
now?
yeah,
so,
of course.
Yeah. So I think was it July we bought our first property in Bidwell.
Yeah.
And then a month after that we bought one in Chour. And then a month after that we bought one in Moree.
Yeah.
So it was just constantly month after month.
Yeah. So you're pretty much buying a property a month, right? So as one was settling, we're just going bang to the other one. And you mentioned Chour. I will come back to that in terms of the story behind that, because I distinctly remember that's the property I should have bought. And Moree and all that, which isn't the markets we would invest in now, but the market was ripe at that point in time there, right? So coming back on Chour, this was, you were, one of the advantages you had above others was that you are forever ready, right? You're finance ready, and you were, putting everything aside and picking up the phone when we called and were very responsive. And Chour happened within a matter of hours, in the sense that one of our conveyancers actually called us and said, hey, here's a property. They're going to let it go at 50% of its value because they found something and they just need this gone. And for those that don't know where Chour is regional New South Wales, right? So and both Chour and Moree are regional. So testimony to that, yes, you can make money in regional areas. Just need to pick the right phase and the right types of properties in those areas, right? So with Chour, I think we had it done and dusted within a day. Yeah, from memory.
I remember that day. I was actually in an important meeting with my manager, and I saw your phone, your call came through, and you had me at 50% discount. I was like, yeah, do it.
yeah. And did you ended up eventually seeing this property, right? You actually drove out there?
Yeah, I went down to Chour because I was just interested to see
what you bought.
Get myself into. But it was such a, I went down with a friend, so there were four of us, and we went down, checked out the area, and we went to this really nice restaurant. So it was a really nice, quaint, sort of, laid back town.
Yeah, and ordinarily we wouldn't buy in this area, right? But if you've got an end buyer that will buy it off you, and someone that'll rent it off you, and it's 50% discounted, of course you jump at it, right? So
yeah, and I think I learned early on after speaking to you, it was all about managing your risk also. Something I never sort of learnt during my early days. So the biggest learning was, if you're going to buy or get into a market or buy something, make sure that you've got someone to sell it to in the situation where life throws you a lemon and you need to sell quickly.
Yeah, and that's it, right? Most people just look at everything in the best case scenario. And when we're building up a portfolio, especially in the early days, right, you need to look at the worst case scenario to say, well, things will go wrong, right? And I will need to offload this property in a hurry. Is there an end buyer to this? And how many of those end buyers are there? If there's only a handful, then obviously you don't want to be buying that property because there's no clear exit strategy out of it. And part of our exit strategy on this, and from memory, I think you bought this cash and then we sorted out the mortgage, right?
Yeah.
Because just for relevance, the purchase price on this was I think from memory 60,000.
60K.
Yeah, and we're not talking a unit, we're not talking a small house. It's a bit of older house, but definitely on a good block, well located within that regional area where you could buy it and then put it back on the market and double your money pretty much straight away.
Pretty much. And I think that's what we ended up doing. A couple of years later, sold it to extract that money and get extra fuel for the next one.
That's right. And when you sell, of course, you do pay capital gains tax, right? So What would your advice be to people when they're selling or looking at selling? Because the first thing that raises heads up is, I'm going to pay tax.
Yeah, look, I think selling, to be honest, for me, selling is always a harder decision than buying. There's a lot more things that you got to juggle.
Yep.
So taxes, also like the opportunity cost. So if you're going to sell this property, what opportunity costs are you losing?
Yeah.
And then you got to then decide, am I going to beat that opportunity by putting that money into some other property? All that runs through your head.
Yeah.
So my biggest advice to that would be, before you make that decision, speak to your advisors, property strategists, accountants, all very important people on your team.
Yeah, yeah. And it's okay to pay tax so long as you minimize it legally.
Yep.
And also you're selling for the right reasons, not just selling because you don't like the property anymore.
Well, it's a mindset thing too, because early on I didn't want to pay any tax, but I've come to realize that if you're paying tax, you must be doing something right.
Yeah. Yes. It's okay to pay tax so long as you're legally minimizing it.
Yeah.
And there's a lead up to it, right? There's a planned sell down so that you are actually taking it as part of a strategy, because then you're losing one rental income stream, but perhaps it then enhances another rental income stream within the portfolio, or actually allows you to then, when the bank's not as lenient in terms of giving you the money, it actually allows you to then further scale the property by, sometimes I feel in life that to go forward 3 steps, you might have to take 1 step back to gain the momentum.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, exactly. And if you look at my entire journey, property portfolio journey, it's always been that almost like it's not a straight line growth. It's like a roller coaster growth.
Yep.
Two steps forward, 1 step back, ups and downs. Hopefully you get more ups than you get downs. So.
And of course we had we've bought houses, we've bought units, we've bought houses where you could add more dwellings to, which you've done, and then we've also then gone through a whole lot of refinances, restructuring, increasing rents, and also even today, even though you haven't been in the buying phase for a couple of years because of you're in mini retirement. The idea is always that you're all accumulating, then you're consolidating, then you accumulate again. So it goes in fits and bursts. It's not a linear trajectory, is it?
Correct. Yeah. So true. And a lot of it's just like, for example, life. What are you doing in life? So at the moment, you say I'm in mini retirement, but I feel like I'm actually starting my entire career again, because I've just, set up a startup business. But, you've got your life throwing, things at you, but then you've also got the market doing various things. And as you know, there's markets within markets, and things move at different paces to each other. So it's always just reassessing that as time goes to see where are the opportunities.
Yeah. So the portfolio obviously has empowered you to then take a break from your career in IT and then start up a business that you're in the throes of doing right now. And in the midst of that, you've also started a family as well.
Yeah, correct. So I wouldn't suggest or give advice to anyone to do this. So start a family, have your wife start university, and start a business where you're not drawing an income. That's really stressful.
Yeah, but the portfolio does support it, right?
100%. Yeah. So without this portfolio, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing right now, which is following my passions, trying to build something from scratch to give back to the universe. Without this portfolio, the way I think about it, for those gamers out there, whoever I used to play Commodore 64, Wonder Boy and Goose and Goals. Every time you collect the star and you get that extra life, that's what a portfolio is to me. It's like this extra life.
That's a really good way of putting it, right? Because you're going through this journey, you're picking up more fuel, more lives, and that allows you to then go another burst of energy until you get to the next star, click up the next star, and gives you another burst of energy.
Yeah.
And of course, every now and then, if I take the game analogy, every now and then you go for the star, but you get killed, right?
Yeah, but then at least you've got lives behind you.
Behind you,
I'm collecting lives. I mean, that sounds bad, but...
He's the Grim Reaper of property. That's what he is. So, okay, let's we're painting this as really rosy, right? But there were some hairy moments in your portfolio. Let's talk about a few of those. So I understand, from what I understand, you've had some issues with tenants. You've had issues with properties having fire damage and all. So how did you navigate through that, and what were they?
So tenants, they come in all shapes and forms. I had a property where tenant looked rosy coming in. For the first 2 years, all good.
Yep.
But then something happened to him, was on the run from the police. So my property was just getting raided by police every month almost. Doors getting knocked down.
And this is where if the police or the ambos come and they knock the door down, you as a landlord, you're liable for it. They don't pay for it. Yeah, so
that's right. You got to fix and pay for it. So it was just constantly. And the thing was too, like the guy was on the run. Yeah. So we had to get sheriffs and get a QCAT and everything. All that was involved. But my advice would be make sure you have a very strong property manager that knows how to navigate this. Yeah. And your insurances, understand what you're entitled to from an insurance perspective. But, with a good property manager, they know all these,
ins and outs.
So I rely heavily on property managers.
And so you mentioned QCAT, so that's obviously the properties in Queensland. Yeah. And the reality is that it could be anywhere. The property could be in any demographic. You're likely to get some issues as your portfolio grows, right? If you're owning one or two properties, then your problems are not as amplified. But when you have a score of properties, then it does get amplified because you've got so many moving parts. And one of the things we're discussing was, every time my property manager calls, you get a phone call, you sort of get palpitations, right? What have I got to spend now? And especially now after COVID, we're starting to see more maintenance happening in the portfolio. I can attest to that personally. How's been your experience over COVID?
COVID was actually really tough. That was probably one of my darkest moments during my portfolio journey. Yeah. It was a period where it was like Murphy's Law. If anything can go wrong, it will go wrong. And that year, 2022/23, pretty much more than half of my portfolio was either issues with tenants, so drug related. One house being used
employment and all that.
And employment was a big one. So people, vacancies. Yep. More than half of my portfolio was vacant at the time, and trying to find new people to come in was hard. And I also had a commercial property that was a takeaway shop that during COVID they just couldn't, support themselves. So that was vacant for 10 months. Right. So massive cash flow to the tune, like negative cash flow to the tune of like 100,000 I lost that year just from loss of rent and repairs. And so that was tough.
Yeah. And so obviously, you had the reserves in place to actually smooth it out for you. But it would be testing times for anyone having that barrage of phone calls. And then it seems, this is what I find personally, is that if there's one or two things wrong, it seems to have a spiral, because then everything you get in every phone call you get, because you're not in the right mindset, it seems to be a problem and a burden.
Well, and my wife can agree with me, I was probably not the most pleasant person to be around during that period. Snappy, grumpy. I was just in a bad place. But as you mentioned, excuse me, you mentioned the buffer, having that's so important, that financial buffer. So I did have that, but unfortunately I burnt through it pretty quickly. Yeah. So during that period, I was actually forced to sell a asset that I did not want to sell. Yep. But circumstances forced me to.
Yep. And was it cash flow, or was it just that property had done its job?
The property had just done its job. Yeah. And it was two things actually. It was an old aging property, constant repairs, constant issues. Yep. So I thought I hit two birds with one stone, cash out and alleviate some of my administrative burden.
Yep. And you were not earning major dollars that financial year, so it was well planned in terms of the exit, right?
Exactly. So capital gains tax was almost non-existent in that scenario because I was not drawing an income.
Yeah. When I'm talking to you, I'm also thinking in my head, right? And I just thought, with your previous comment, I've got the perfect title for this podcast: Hiroli Chour, the irritable investor.
Yeah. That'll probably sum me up.
So we wanted to talk about obviously the insurance claims that you've had over the years, right? And there've been a few, not manufactured by any way, shape, or form. But this is you mentioned before that it's important to have the right insurance and also the right type of property manager in place. Are there any stories that you can share in your portfolio where you've had insurance claims and it's been forgiving in the portfolio?
Oh yeah, definitely. So we had one incident. It was a property that was being used as I wouldn't say a drug lab, but close enough.
Yep.
Methamphetamines is not very good. It's a very nasty substance. So this is where I learned the importance of actually having a good property manager and good insurances in place. I did not know that substances like methamphetamine, just a little bit of it on your walls or anywhere in your house may require you to re-gut the whole house.
Yep.
Like remove all the chip rock, remove ceilings, remove everything. Now, without insurance, that would have been at least, what's the estimate? A couple of hundred.
About, yeah.
100,000?
Yeah, easy.
Yeah, so my property manager put through the claim and they paid out. They came back with like $37,000 to clean up the place.
Which, if we hadn't had their insurances and their insurances, right? And again, you need to speak to your insurance provider for this advice. But look at the fine print in terms of what they actually cover. And sometimes it's worthwhile paying that extra few $100s more to have that cover.
Yeah, 100%. And there's a question I like to ask when I'm searching for insurance companies. I actually ask my property managers, of all the insurance companies out there, which ones do you prefer to work with? Because they pay out easy and they support the investors. And there's only, I think, 2 in the market that really always stand out.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, we're alluding to the fact that these properties were in very low socioeconomic areas, but that's not the case. These were in good areas, which continue to perform, and life for everyone takes a turn, right? So you don't, the property that you're talking about, the tenant was actually good in the beginning, right? But something happened.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's hard. Like, I mean, especially after COVID, and the cost of living these days, you know, people can turn nasty. Me being one, as you said, as I mentioned.
The irritable investor.
Right. When life throws you a lemon tree. You sometimes do make some pretty rash decisions.
Yeah. So if we were to have this journey all over again, let's say we wound the clock back to 2012, right? Apart from agreeing that I'm a handsome-looking bloke, what else would you change?
Oh, that's a good question. So, look, I think I did a lot right. If I was to change one thing, now knowing what I know now and the power of compound growth and leverage and all that, in my most productive years, being when I was in my 20s and 30s, I reckon I would have just saved harder and worked harder. So I was very complacent in my job in CBA. Cushy job. If I had my way again, I would have actually tried to earn more income just to really propel that property investing acquisition phase. Because from what I can see, I was just looking at my portfolio last night and then going, okay, over the journey of 15 years, my goodness, if you pump in $1 back then, it will be worth at least $4 now. So
and that's saying something, right? And this is where when I talk to most successful investors, they come up with the same thing, right? They wish they'd gone harder in the beginning years, but it's hard to see that end play that early in the piece, even though you've got all the social proof around you, because it becomes personal to you and it's your financials. It's very hard to see it actually working. So you actually need to see social proof for yourself within your portfolio before you scale. But by the time the prices have moved, right? The properties we were buying back then, they were 250K, right? Houses for 250K, units for 150, and yet today the same houses would be 750K. The units would be 450, 500s. So it does move. So the longer you leave it in the initial phases, the more you're setting yourself to pay more in the later years.
Yeah, correct. Like so the houses that you mentioned, they're Queensland. 250. And they didn't do anything for a very long time. It wasn't what 4 or 5 years ago. It started to awaken, and then the last couple of years, it just all of a sudden it's just gone bonkers, the price. So this whole delayed gratification, it's so real in the property investing game. You can't expect to buy a property and really passively hope that it goes up in value like next year. It's just
it's more good luck than good management when it does. But also we're buying at the right phases of the market, right? So and also understanding the cycle. So particularly Queensland, right? So bottom of the market to the next peak is 7 to 11 years, and it did take us all of the 11 years to reach that true doubling effect, and then some. Both from a rent point of view and also from a value point of view. And in the meantime, you had to hold on for those 10 odd years with the negative cash flow that it had until it slowly petered down to neutral and then to positive. And we're discounting the 2.5% interest rates in this journey, right? Because when you started, what interest rates were you paying back then?
About then, 2, 3, 4. If you get 4, you'll be like, wow, that's too much.
That's yeah. So in 2012, the interest rates were about 6.5.
Yeah, 6.5. So the 6 and then came down to the 3, which everyone's laughing. Laughing, and now they're back to 6 now.
That's right. Yeah. So your standard interest rate is if you do your sums at 5.5%, 6%, you're fairly safe, right? That was an abnormal dip in the rates. We were in emergency measures during COVID. Yet everyone seems to measure that against that interest rate and saying we had high interest rates. You having started the journey 15 odd years ago, you've seen the normal interest rates over the journey. And it sits around that 6% mark.
I mean, when you're doing your strategy and planning, you always buffer in extra percentage points on top anyway. The banks do it. They always put an extra 2 or 3% on top of your servicing assessment rates and whatnot. So, apply the same. Always, I just want to make sure I can sleep easy at night. That I'm not over leveraging myself. So when you started, obviously the portfolio was negative, particularly your 2 properties in Victoria, which was the house and land packages, right? So which you didn't buy off a developer, you actually became the developer there. So that's the difference. I bought the land off a land developer. And then built the house myself.
So that was negative, obviously, because the strategy you're pursuing that at that time was getting the depreciation benefits and saving tax. Right?
Not a good strategy.
No. And then, so you sold that, obviously.
I had to sell it for various personal reasons. I needed the cash injection. I sold them.
And one of the things that most people don't talk about and most advisors don't talk about is that when you've claimed depreciation, when you go on to sell, you've got to add that back in, right? And so often they do their sums on high level on just a piece of paper without delving deep into the the actual mechanics of selling a property, and realize that they are paying more tax than before, right? So one of the things I learned very early in my journey is that when you're talking about federal grants, federal incentives, tax incentives, there's no free lunch. You always paid back in some way, shape or form. So by selling those properties, that freed up a lot of negative cash flow.
Well, it put more fuel back in my tank, so then I could then really power through. So 2012, I did that big first acquisition bulk buy.
Did
a reassessment in 2013, 14, and I think 2015 we went pretty hard again. I think we bought another 4 or 5 probably
properties
that year.
And they were spread all over, right? So New South Wales, Queensland, the market wasn't quite there in Victoria for us to go back in there, but we did end up buying a property in Victoria, which was a corner block from memory with a nice asbestos roof.
I just sold that one.
So there you go. There you go.
No Lane.
Yes. And this was a property that no one was touching, but it paid its dividends.
It did, like it was the crappiest house
on the best street.
Good street, down in North Lane next to Geelong.
And so talk me through that. What was the journey with that property?
So that one, when we acquired it, like everything looked great. It was, under market value, and the prospects of the area, Geelong, being, is it regional? It's
Well,
sort of, yes, no.
it's debatable, right?
Yeah.
So Geelong is the second largest CBD of Victoria.
Yeah.
It is from the heart of Melbourne to Geelong is 45 minutes. So if you're talking Sydney terms, we're buying in Campbelltown as an example. Or if you're talking Brisbane terms, we're buying maybe Beenleigh from, and that's the distance from the city. And if you're talking Perth, then we're buying in, say, Gosnells, right? And that's how far it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So with that property, the capital growth aspects of it were fantastic. So the thing with that property, because it was so old, every couple of months it was a maintenance issue.
Yep.
So on paper, the cash flow looked good, but in reality, constant repairs and stuff really does eat into that cash flow. So that's when I made that decision. Okay, well, this property's done what it sort of needed to do in this market. And I did consult you a couple of years ago, I think, Victor. So, is it a good time to sell this one now? And you said, yeah, if you can get this price, sell it.
Because there was new tenancy laws coming in, compliance issues coming in with the property, right? So really important in Victoria that you buy a property that is conversant with the new compliance laws, which is slowly being rolled out in every state.
So I didn't sell that immediately when you said, go for it to sell. I sort of held on for a bit longer, hoping that the price would continue to go up, but it didn't. So that's when I made the decision to sell to fund my lifestyle and my business. So,
So obviously property is a great enabler, right? So when you buy a property, if it means that you can deploy the money elsewhere, whether it's further acquisitions or business growth or even personal use, right? It is okay to sell.
Oh, 100%. I if you acquire 5, sell to 1 or 2. It's at the end of the day, you're still growing your wealth. Not living off instant noodles.
Were you living off instant noodles at any point?
Geez, yeah, probably back in the early days. Not as much. So my problem was I eat cheaply, but when you're working in banking and finance, those Friday night get-togethers, by golly, they can really take a hit on your wallet.
Yes, So you're whilst you're accumulating wealth, you're still not afraid to enjoy lifestyle.
And you shouldn't have to. I think it's so important. You get one life. Everyone's got a finite time here, so. Try to enjoy it as much as you can. And as you mentioned, I like to take these mini retirements every 3 to 4 years just to enjoy life while I'm still can walk around and not having all sorts of health issues.
So talk me through that. How does this mini retirement look like and what's the trigger points?
Well, trigger points normally would be, okay, look at my finances and my portfolio. Okay, how's that looking? If it looks good and I feel like I can probably sell something to fund a 1-year gap year, I will do it. I've done that twice now, taken that decision twice, and a lot of it is just traveling and experiencing. So I'm not a very materialistic person. For a very long time, I was just driving an old banged up Hyundai XL.
I remember that car.
Yeah, got a funny story about that car, but maybe another time. So more experiences and just traveling. And I find traveling so important for me because it gives me perspective in life. And so you've tried retirement twice. Now take me through this. Right, is retirement cheaper than gainful employment or more expensive? More expensive for sure.
Right answer.
Way more expensive.
So, and this is what I talk about with most of my clients, right? When they start, right, they have this magical number that say, if I get this many dollars in my pocket at retirement, I'll be fine. And the first thing I turn around and say is, you've got to double it. Because it can be very expensive because you've got more time on your hands, and more time means more expenditure.
Well, you got to find things to do, otherwise you get bored.
So, that's it. So in terms of mini retirements, right? So you do lose your structure of employment, right? So how do you manage your time? How do you manage your, for the want of a better word, motivation to get out of bed?
Well, I'm a big proponent of learning and growth. So although I'm taking these mini retirements, they're not just sitting around watching Netflix and twiddling my fingers. I like to set challenges. So I took 1 year off to travel, but then you can't travel for a year because you'll burn through your money so quickly. So I started learning new skills. So there was 1 year I just decided to learn how to code an iPhone app.
Right, okay.
That or another year I learned to go do Swedish massages and stuff. Yeah, so if you're keen for a massage later. But yeah, it's just experiencing something outside what my
comfort zone
is and my corporate prior life has been.
And so obviously we've talked about selling down, we've talked about cash flow in the portfolio, and of course we've talked about the the darker side of property investing, where you've got problems with tenants, problems with property managers. I'd now want to bring it back to, you've got these properties, you had built houses in the past. Have you used and transferred the skill set within the portfolio and built anything?
Yeah, well, right now I'm going through a fairly large scale-ish development for mum and dad's property that they bought 3 decades ago. So we're doing a planning proposal there, working with council. So that's pretty full on. So all those skills that I've learned over my course of property investing, a lot of that's transferable to that. Again, this is all in the property space, but even outside property. So for example, in day-to-day life or in my business, all those skills I learned from property investing. So one of the biggest skill, and this is something I'll recommend everyone to sort of try to get better at, is the speed of decision making, and that's good decision making. So back when I was starting in 2012, I luckily had things up my sleeve, understanding finance to make quick decisions. So I hope I was a quick decider back then.
I don't know. I'll have to dwell my record, mate. There's this property in Chour that I've got up for up for sale.
Yeah. So anyway, so I think 15 years of property investing teaches you to be very good at making very quick, informed decisions, because the opportunities, when they do come, whoever can jump on it first usually wins.
And this is what it is, right? So when you're investing or running a business, right, the more at ease you are at making decisions, and decisions could be either acquisition or sell downs, right? The faster you're able to scale and grow, and the better the portfolio is. Because if you take too long to make decisions, you'll tend to find, human nature, you tend to find too many things wrong with it.
Well, yeah, exactly. And the thing is that it could be any decision. So it's either a yes or a no. That's really the answer at the end of the day. So you just need to, in software, like I'm an engineer, so in software development, there's this method we have called doing a spike task. And really what that is a risk mitigation strategy, where if there's a bunch of unknowns, you time box, let's say 3 days, I'm going to put all my capacity and time and effort into understanding what the risks are and how to mitigate, and learn more about what I need to do. And then make that decision. But you got to make that decision.
So you arm yourself with as much information and then make a decision based on that, right?
Yeah.
Now, in your journey, of course, and you spoke about mum and dad, but apart from mum and dad, were there family and friends that were influencing, with positive and negative influence in terms of your portfolio journey?
Family, funny one. Family always risk averse. They why are you buying Queensland? Why are you buying Melbourne? So they were sort of a negative impact, like always trying to doubt me. So I just stopped talking to them about property because they didn't own any property themselves. In terms of friends, yes, definitely. So I have friends where we started the journey together and we inspire each other. It's almost like healthy competition in a way. So
without breaking the bank, right? And without steering from the journey.
Correct. Sensible. Growth and competition.
It's interesting that you mentioned family, right? Because often family still see you as the young kid. They still see you as the younger brother. They still see you as someone that they've seen go through college, and therefore they have got no life experience, right? And then they bring their own life experience into the advice, and the advice that they give is not maladvice. It's just based on their fears and their love and protection for you, right? So this is where, as a journey into property investing, one of the biggest hurdles I find with most new clients is they let the uncle or the cousin dictate what they need to buy.
Yeah, so that's why it's funny though, because the same uncles and family members that were, 10 years, 15 years ago,
The naysayers.
the naysayers,
Yeah.
they now come back saying, "Oh my goodness, you've done so well.
Yeah.
We wish we listened to you back then." So,
Yeah.
visions,
Yeah.
2020 in hindsight.
That's right. And tables turn, right? And that's been the same with our journey, with Rashmi and my journey, is that a lot of family members, and in fact, a lot of friends, the initial friends that we had, which now over a period of time, they do change as your exposure grows and your experience grows. But they all come back and say, "Oh, I wish I'd started back then." But then the downside is that they actually still don't start, isn't it? Yeah.
I don't know. Humans are funny creatures sometimes.
Yeah, that's right. Which is why you are a bit of a recluse, right?
yeah. I was just saying earlier. If you asked me to do this podcast 10 years ago, I've been all over it. But I'm a bit out of my comfort zone today. Just that imposter syndrome. I don't know what.
No, you've done really well. Yeah, you've done really well, right? So, and this is why I enjoy bringing successful clients to the podcast. Is that there's so much to share. There's so much of scar tissue. There's so much of decision making, and there's so much of hindsight that you can share, because you are here today because of the decisions you made 10, 15 years ago.
Correct, and these are decisions that have just compounded positively in my life. So. Yeah, I'm so glad that I've took this big decision back then and met the right people, the right property group. See what I did there?
Yeah, I know. Very clever.
I'm going to trademark that, so I'm going to charge you to use it.
So, of course, we can continue talking about property and the journey forever.
Yeah.
And we do, whenever we do catch up, even though we live 5 minutes apart. We're not living 5 minutes apart before COVID. You've moved into one of your investments as part of your portfolio planning. And now, if we're talking to clients today, what's one advice that you'd give someone that's a two-phase question, right? So what's one advice you'd give to someone that's just starting out? And the second phase to the question, what's one advice you'd give to someone that already has a portfolio?
Yeah. So for the new one starting out, it's like I'm so such a believer in that. Make that decision. I still, like you say, I talk to family members and friends. Every time I catch up for Christmas, they're always like, "Oh, I'm thinking of buying a property," but they never do. So how do you make that decision? Well, a lot of it comes down to educating yourself, and also number one, actually learning about money, finances, leverage, and here's something about property. I feel like it's the only investment where you can actually take a long position and a short position on the market, and I'll sort of go into that.
Yep. So
properties, as you know, hopefully if you buy it right, they double in price every 10 years. So you're taking a long position on the property itself, the asset, in anticipation that's going to go up in value.
Yep.
But you're taking a short position on money, fiat currency,
the cash flow,
the cash itself. So you're borrowing 300 grand from a bank now. In 20 years, that 300 grand is not going to be worth much. The inflation and debasement of money.
Yeah.
So it's basically this perfect investment. So I think as an early starter, learn about all that. Learn about currency, financing, lending, and then surround yourself by the right people that know property investing. They've done it. They've got the battle scars.
Yep.
And you'll find that when you just go and talk to people, they, in an intimate situation, they'll be more willing to open up and actually explain some of the battle scars they've gone through. And that's what I look for today. Has the person got the battle scars and the experience before I actually take advice from them?
Where's the advice coming from?
Where is it coming from? You got to be in the game.
Which is one of the reasons why we run the Right on Track, meetings that we have, which is the educational meetings. We've just restarted because it gets all of the investors in the one room. They can leverage off each other's experiences, the fears, what hasn't worked, what has worked, because it's not a singular journey, right? You can leverage off other people's journey to make it part of yours.
100%. And early on, like 2000, I remember 2012 to 2015, I was at every single one of those run-on tracks.
Yep. I remember you'd come straight from work directly into it and probably be one of the last people to enter.
That's right. Yeah, with my banged up Hyundai Excel.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So for someone that's already invested, they've got plenty of properties under the belt. So the definition of plenty, a couple of properties. What would you say?
This is where it's super important to get your systems and the foundations in place, because your first few properties, you can manage that yourself and things will tick along and you can manage it. But as you grow to like 20, let's not even 20, like 15, 10 even plus, things can get out of control very quickly if you don't have any of these systems in place. And what do I mean by systems? I'm an engineer, so I try to automate as many things as possible. So all my rental statements that come through, I just make sure that they've gone to the bookkeeper. I try to delegate as much as I can, because your job as a property investor, eventually when you get to that stage, it becomes more strategy. Yeah. And less being in the
don't get caught
trenches.
Up in the nitty-gritty. Yeah.
It's good to know the nitty-gritty. Because, when you're fighting your accountants and others, at least you can speak the same language. Yep. But extract yourself from that eventually. Yes, which is what I've sort of done for the last 5 years now. So, I've got bookkeepers and accountants and using all sorts of integrations and systems in place and starting to play with AI to see what I can sort of use there.
Yeah, absolutely. A true engineer at heart, right?
Yeah, that's it.
And so, a final question. What would you tell Hiroli of 2012 that you know now?
I would say, good job, mate. You've at least, on the right track, the right path. Just less partying and work harder.
Yep. But there you go, right? So obviously, it's been a journey, and I'm really grateful to have you here today at the podcast and sharing all of these gems with our listeners. And obviously, you've told the good, the bad, and the ugly of property investing, right? And regardless of which demographics you buy in, you will always have some problems. And Murphy's Law is that most of the problems will come all at once, and it's a mindset game rather than anything else. And so, really, I'd like to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here. And for the listeners, be in tune for the next podcast, which we'll have shortly.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature, does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs, and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property, or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you.